Okay. All right. Here we go. Good evening. Welcome to GGCF, MBC&S edition, or Maryland Bible College edition. I don't know how that works, but whatever. Here we go. Someone pray, please. Avery, can you open us in prayer?
Dear Lord, we just ask you to bring us in the Spirit tonight. We ask you to edify us and give us words of wisdom and edification, Lord. We just ask that you can speak to us tonight. If there's anyone in particular you need to speak to, we just ask that you have words for that person. In Jesus' name we pray this.
Amen. Amen. All right, so let's open to Exodus. Exodus chapter 15. Exodus 15. We have the book of Exodus is, we said, divided into three parts. Right? We had the first 14 chapters is the leaving Egypt. It begins with them being slaves, and it ends with them looking behind them in the Red Sea and watching Egypt be swallowed up. And what a scene. What a scene, right? And then chapter 15 through 18 is the wandering, the journey from Egypt into Sinai, up to Mount Sinai. And then 19 through 40 is the law, right? God is giving them the law and leading them point by point through the covenant that He's making with them. But let's go to review, right? Review chapter 14. 1, Israel walks through on dry ground. Right? Isn't that amazing? That you would walk through the floor of a sea and it would be dry, right? Because it wasn't just people walking through, but they had, like Glenna mentioned this morning, all the gold. Remember all the gold and clothes that they took from the Egyptians?
Oh, yeah.
That had some weight to it, huh? Yeah. That had some weight to it. And then they had their carts with their stuff and the cattle and the whole thing. Like it is an excursion to cross the sea. And when Egypt is catching up to them, the Egyptians are catching up. It's not like, we kind of visualize this scene where Israel's like getting out and then Egypt is getting into the Red Sea, and it's like, oh, just missed them. But actually it says that Egypt overtook them and that the cloud of God, the presence of God, moved from in front of Israel to the back of Israel, and it caused confusion to Egypt. So they were right there, like they were on top of them. And it says in 14:25 that God took the wheels, actually verse 24, came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked on the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud and troubled the host of the Egyptians. Okay? If God doesn't trouble the host of the Egyptians, then Israel's toast. And then it says in verse 25 that He took the wheels off their chariots, and the Egyptians wanted to flee. Why? Because they knew that the Lord fought against them. They felt God pushing back against them. Imagine that, like that feeling. I wonder how many people have felt that way. I mean, we've watched a video, I can't remember the name of it, Pastor Van Doren's class, where it highlighted some of the history of Israel and how miraculously they came out of battles, right? There was one story of these 3 soldiers that were stuck in a minefield, and they had to get across the minefield by morning, right? So they were like, all right, we'll crawl through, we'll disarm the mines as we go. And I think something like 3 hours they went a few meters, right? Because and they look up, they're like, whoo, we got a ways to go. And then all of a sudden this wind came out of nowhere and just blew all the top soil or the top sand, the top layer away, and all the mines were exposed. And they just stood up and walked through. Like unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. Then there's story after story after story, and that's in modern day Israel. Like that's in the 7 Days War, and then in 1969, and then at different times. So it's amazing that God did this, and God is doing this here with Egypt, right? He is the one that is pushing back against Egypt. And Israel is just kind of making their way through the sea. It's amazing, amazing. And they make it through, and then they turn around and whoosh, right, it all unloads and Egypt is buried. And we said, you can look up online, there's articles about it. They found chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea. They found horse bones and human remains for what they say 5,000 men. Right? So there's an army buried at the bottom of the Red Sea with no ship, right? There's no remnants of a sunken ship or anything like that, but an army of chariots, horses, and Egyptian weapons and everything at the bottom of the Red Sea. So, I don't know. Makes sense to me, right? Adds up. So then, chapter 15, this is the beginning. They're leaving Egypt. The story of Israel, there's two things that happen. First, they are going out of Israel, or out of Egypt, but then later they go into the Promised Land. This is the story of them going out, right? By the mercy of God, they are going out of Egypt. God does not bring us out of something unless He wants to also bring us into something. He never brings us out of bondage and into our own willpower. But when He brings us out of something, He delivers us into something else, right? So we have been delivered. We have been delivered from the bondage of the flesh, right? The sin, the three things that we have. We have the world, the flesh, and the devil. Three common enemies that we all have, right? We all have these things against us, right? The world, the flesh, and the devil. God has delivered us out of each one of them, right? We are not of the world. We are in the world, but we are not of the world. The devil is under His feet, and the flesh has been overcome by the power of the cross, right? And He has brought us into, He has delivered us into into Christ. We are seated in Christ in heavenly places. But this story that we're looking at now, they are out of Egypt, out of a place of bondage, and they are going into the Promised Land. But first they take 40 years wandering around the desert. And I have maps upstairs that I forgot to bring down. I'll bring them down next week because it's cool. It has like a chart and you can see what happens where. Right? Numbers and pictures and things. It's always useful. But this is the story of them going out. And as they go out, chapter 15 is they are across the Red Sea and they are on their way to the Promised Land. Right? It takes some time. But as they go, chapter 15 is the first song, a song of redemption that we have recorded in the Bible, actually. Like Moses sings a song of redemption, that he is overcome by what he has seen, and he breaks out in a song. And isn't that so fitting? That when we see God work in our lives, it does something, and we have a lot to say. Right? We have a lot to sing about in our hearts. We can make this song of redemption. Verse 6. This is a cool little thing we did this morning. Thy right hand, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has dashed in pieces the enemy. And in the greatness of your excellency, you have overthrown them that rose up against you. You sent forth your wrath, which consumed them as stubble. What a great thing. God's right hand. What is God's right hand? It's Christ. It's a symbol of Christ, right? How does God reach down into the earth? How does God touch the earth? How does He minister to us? But He gives us Christ. Whenever you see God walking on this planet, it's Christ. We saw with Abraham, remember in chapter 18 and 19, where He comes and he deals with Abraham. Abraham makes him a dinner. Right? They have this whole thing. They negotiate for Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah. That's Christ. It's a Christophany, it's called. But however God is acting on this earth, it's by his right hand. Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. And when he is here, right, Philippians 2, he came in the likeness of sinful flesh, right? Or Romans 5 and Philippians 2 is verses. So we read verse 6, and you can just put Christ in there, right? Christ, O Lord, has become glorious in power. Christ, O Lord, has dashed. Does that sound good? Doesn't that sound good to read that to yourself in that way? That we have this victory, and as we have been looking through this, Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, it's been so obvious that Christ is in it, right? But as you remember, we talked about the Passover feast. They said it's kept for generation to generation to generation to generation. Make sure you keep it. And why did we say that was important? But because if it is kept from generation to generation to generation, when Christ comes, it will be recognizable. That they will say, oh, this is the Lamb that is slain, right? On Passover, Christ is taken into Jerusalem. Palm Sunday, he goes into Jerusalem the same day that the Lamb would have been selected for the Passover feast. Remember that 4 days? And I said the 10th day, take the lamb, and then on the 14th day, slay the lamb. It adds up that as Christ is coming in on Palm Sunday, that he is the lamb that is being delivered to Israel as the Passover lamb. And he is crucified that Friday. So the uniqueness of this, and then if you look at the Song of Moses, that how the right hand has come down and it has dashed to pieces the enemy, that Christ in Colossians chapter 2 is dashed to pieces, 2:15, he is dashed to pieces the works of the devil. And Christ even said it, didn't he? I came to destroy the works of the devil. Actually, he says it in 1 John chapter 5. So that's Moses' song of redemption that is highlighting and making the way for Christ. And in verse 19, Miriam, his sister, chimes in, and all the ladies get their tambourines, and they start going for it, and they have a good old time. Just like the ladies in Ghana, right? These ladies in Ghana, right? I mean, the rhythm, and then the speed, and the precision. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, wasn't it? Like they all had the same movements, and they were going. It was impressive, right? But that's the scene here with Miriam, and imagine the whole camp of Israel feeling the pressure of Egypt coming up against them, feeling the complaints of being killed in the desert, and feeling the miracle of God opening the sea, and then finally being in a place of safety, and finally being in a place of freedom, right? They are free now. They are no longer slaves. And then they just break out in song. What a beautiful picture. And Miriam and the whole gang, they're all in there. But it doesn't take long, right? It doesn't take long for Israel to become Israel. And here they see in verse 22, Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. 3 days. 3 days. That's all it takes. And then what happens? They came to Marah, and they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what are we going to drink? Right? What are we going to drink? Like they straight quickly to murmuring. Right? 3 days. 3 days. You just saw a sea part. You just saw all of this happen right before your eyes. Not by story, not like a story your parents told you before bed, but you literally walked and you saw 2 walls of water on either side. You saw a cloud confuse an army behind you, and now we're going to complain, right? And we're thirsty. Right? We're so this way, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Sunday morning, I walk out of here, I'm like, yeah! 3 days later, Wednesday morning, just, right? I'm thirsty. I'm miserable. God, what are you doing to me? Right? Oh, we're so like this. But God is gracious. God is compassionate in the whole thing. And he gives us a way to deal with our murmuring. Right? He gives Israel a way to deal with their murmuring. And it's the same way he gives us to deal with our murmuring. It says, and he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast it in the waters were made sweet. And there he made them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. The tree makes the bitter waters sweet, right? The tree makes the bitter waters sweet. And it speaks to, and it comforts them in their murmuring, corrects them in their murmuring. What do I have in my life, in our Christian life, in our experience? What do we have that can correct our murmuring and can put sweetness into bitter waters? But the cross, right? Another tree that God used to where Christ was crucified and where I am crucified and where my murmuring is corrected, right? Like, because the attitude, where can I fix my attitude? I can do it by willpower, right? I can say, I'm going to have a better attitude, I'm going to have a better attitude, but at some point I'm going to have such an attitude about having a better attitude that I'm going to be frustrated, right? And it's tough. But where else can I get outside of myself? Where else can I get up into another plane but by the cross? Right? Bring your murmuring to the cross. But isn't that interesting? It doesn't say don't murmur, right? But bring your murmuring to the cross. Don't bring your murmuring to each other, right? And Moses, right? They bring it to Moses, that's good, whatever, but he is bringing it to God. And they bring their murmuring to the cross. The cross makes the bitter waters sweet. There's amazing, this whole chapter from 14 to 18, everything is about Jesus. Everything. So, verse 27, he said, and they came to Elim, where 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. So through 3 days, complaints, the bitter waters are made sweet, and then God leads them into abundance. All right? And I just like to make the application that through the cross, He leads us into abundance, where there's 12 wells of water, 70 palm trees. I don't know what 70 palm trees means for 3 million people, but hey, it's notable that there's 70 palm trees there. But 12 wells of water, and there is abundance, and they camp there, and they are sustained there. They are taken care of. We have to live by the cross. This whole Christian life doesn't work without the cross, right? Christ said it in John chapter 12, unless a seed falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone. But if it dies, then it brings forth life. Right? Through death, we receive life, and we are led into the abundance of Christ. Romans chapter 5 talks about much more, much more, much more, much more. Where do we find much more? Through the cross. And like we spoke about last night, that life is so much more than what we can see, what we can hear, what we can understand naturally. And we need to be brought up to a spiritual understanding of things. And He leads us there. And by living a spiritual life, there is unbelievable potential. Unbelievable potential. The power of God is accessed when we go through the cross and we live by faith. We need it so much. Because naturally we gravitate to the dust, to the murmuring. Right? We murmur. We love it. And then, okay, verse 16. Here we go again. Right? And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin. Sounds like an awful place. Las Vegas, maybe. Which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they're departing out of the land of Egypt. Okay, so we're a month and a half out. A month and a half removed from the Red Sea. 3 days in, they're complaining. Now they've made it 12 days before the next complaint. That's pretty good, isn't it? That's growth right there. That's like triple. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, and when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For you have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. That's dramatic, isn't it? I feel like it's a little overkill. I mean, yeah, they don't have any food or water, but they're pretty dramatic. And the way I think this is happening is that it's not 6 million people or 600,000 men coming to Moses and everybody's screaming the same thing. But there are the heads of Israel, right? There are the leaders. There are each tribe. There's the 12 tribes, and they are all represented. And the elders come forth, I believe. It talks about the elders coming in chapter 17, when he hits the rock and the water comes out. He calls all the elders up. So I think Moses has a confrontation with these same guys with the same complaints. Not to say it's not the voice of Israel. I think it is the voice of the nation, that they are this way and they're thinking this way, but it's spoken by the same way. So he sees these guys coming and he goes, here we go, right? Here we go. Hasn't even been 2 weeks and they got something new, right? They got something else to come at me with. So they complain. And it's interesting to see what is their memory of Egypt. They have like some kind of fantastical view of Egypt. We sat by the flesh pots, right? We watched the stew get cooked, and then we ate it. We had bread. We had so much bread. It was so good. Yeah, but you were slaves. You were making bricks with no straw. Like, you were being abused. You had no freedom. And how easily can you look back into a place of bondage and fantasize it and say that was so good? It was so good. And there's a deception in that when we live a righteous life and when we walk with God, that we're missing out on something. Or that I look back and I say, I had more fun. I was more fun back then. Did you ever have someone say that to you? You used to be more fun when, right? Thanks, friend, right? You really know how to pick me up, huh? You were more fun when you, and it's like, oh, great. Is that something that was fantastic? Yeah, maybe you had a pot full of meats and you had bread, but where was the depression? Where was the discouragement? How did it feel the next day? Whatever, all the things, right? When we live in sin, there is this climax where it's like, yeah, this is awesome. But do you remember picking up the pieces afterwards? Do you remember the emptiness and then the chase to fulfill it again? The looking back is not this way. C.S. Lewis talks about it, that in our memories we build up things in big time. And he talked about going to a vacation home when he was a kid by the lake, right? And he loved it. The family went there. I don't know if it was just a story he made up, or because I don't even know if they have lakes in England. Do they? They have lakes? They have bodies of water in England? Swamps, bogs, right? Yeah. But so they would go to the lake house, and it was always fun because the family went there and it was relaxing, and when they were there, nobody had any commitments, nobody had any restrictions. They were just free. And he always, as he grew older, he fantasized about the lake house. And when he was in a difficult time, I just got to get to the lake house, everything will be fine. And then one time when he was older, he went back and it was dilapidated and it was cobwebs and there was a hole in the floor and the place was depressing. And is it the lake house, or is it the relationship, and is it the life and the family? Right? That's what he's saying. So when you look back at the life that you had or the life that you lived in, and we have this ability to fantasize that everything was puppies and rainbows and we just had good times everywhere, is that right, or am I putting the best part of it and just playing a highlight reel, right? Because we do that, and then we would say, "Man, what am I doing now?" Right? What am I doing now? I'm sitting in a fellowship hall Thursday night. What the heck, right? We could turn it around that way, but actually, I was in bondage, and now I'm free. And now I'm free to do whatever I want, and what I want is to be with the body of Christ and to find value in the Word of God. This right here is humongous, because if I take away the value of the Word and I put down the value of this walk with Christ, then all I have to look back to is the highlight of Egypt. And the highlight of Egypt is very short. Right? It's a short film. 400 years in Egypt, and the highlight reel is cucumbers, onions, flesh pot, and bread. Those are the positives. Negatives: making bricks with no straw, being beaten, right? Having no freedom, having no place of your own, Right? Like we cannot go into this way of thinking, because if I do, it speaks about Abraham in Hebrews chapter 11. It says that if he had been mindful of the place he came from, he could have gone back to it. But instead, he looked for a city whose builder and maker was God. He looked for something eternal. That's where we are finding the real substance of life. Because here, yes, there is a highlight reel. There is, right? There's cantatas, there's retreats, there's, like a couple weeks ago in our service, I think that was a unique experience with that song that I've been singing ever since, or I've been listening to. Because that is a highlight. But then what do we say in the other times? But what am I picking up the pieces? No, I am being healed in the process, right? Like we spoke about last night, I am working out my salvation. I am being put back together by Christ. And then these highlights where I have these great times, these missions trips, we go to Houston, we go to Africa, we go speak here, we go serve here, whatever we do, those are fantastic. But those all just support the life that is sustained by Christ in it all, right? That is what we are looking for. That's the substance we're looking for. Because that is life, right? That is life. That's not life. That's bondage. And it's like it can come or go. I don't know. It's not very. Anyway, whatever. So, okay, where are we? Okay, they complain. And then verse 4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven. Right? I will rain bread from heaven. Why? For you. Right? For you. Why else would God rain bread from heaven? Right? No reason. No reason. In Matthew chapter 4, when the devil tempted Jesus, and he said, Are you hungry, Jesus? And naturally the answer is, yes, I'm starving. I've been fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, yeah, I'm hungry. Why don't you turn the stones into bread? He had no need to do that. He didn't do that. But here he rains bread from heaven because it's not for him. He doesn't do this for himself. But what he does for us. And here he's doing it for Israel. I will rain bread from heaven for you. That this is not happening anywhere except for the town of Chew and Swallow, if you're familiar with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, right? That is the only place. But it is not happening that bread is raining from heaven. But God is there for His people. He is sustaining His people. He is called His people, and He will do anything for them. We say, but that doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. It also doesn't make sense that He would take 5 loaves and 2 fish and feed 5,000 men and women, right? That doesn't make sense either, but He did it. And why did He do it? He did it for us. So He does this for Israel. There's no other reason for Him to rain bread from heaven, right? There's no other reason. You could read Psalm chapter 104. It's a great like aerial view of the world and how God is sustaining every pocket of the world. It's amazing. It says that He pulls the sun, and He like, right? And there's the stars. And then it says He feeds the young lions. He feeds these people. And it says the lions look to Him for food. Yes, He sustains them. But for us, He rains down bread from heaven. It's amazing. And the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron bring the word to the people. They say, okay, we understand you're hungry. Anybody hungry? Yeah, starving. And he says, okay, God will rain down bread from heaven. Collect only what you need for the day, and then on Saturday or on Friday, collect enough for 2 days. Right? Okay, that sounds fine. Right? Why? Because the Lord has heard your murmuring, in verse 9. The Lord has heard your murmuring. And it came to pass as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. Not many times do you see the glory of the Lord appear. And this is one of them. Right? A confirmation. It's going to rain bread from heaven. That sounds like crazy town. Yep. But there is the confirmation that this is from God. The glory of the Lord is in the cloud. right? It only happens here. It happens at the tabernacle. It happens with Solomon's temple. It happens with Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration, and maybe a couple more times, but not many. And this is one of them. So he did this because he heard their murmurings. And then look at this in verse 13. It came to pass that at the evening the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay around about the host. So the quail, here the quail are given in a positive way, but we don't know anything else about it. Later on, they complain about having too much manna, and he gives them quail, and they eat it, and then they get sick. Remember? So the quail is in a negative connotation, but here it's in a positive connotation, but we don't know how much they ate or how often the quail came. Maybe it was on Fridays, like Fish Friday with the Catholics, right? Maybe they had Quail Friday. I don't know, but it doesn't say, but they are given there. And quail are indigenous to this area of the world. And have you ever seen a quail? It's like a little tiny bird. We would go quail hunting in upstate New York, and it's like they don't exactly run to you, right? Like any wild tiny bird, like they don't come to you. So there wouldn't be, but this area where Israel was, it seems like they all gathered and they were able to take them, it seems so. But that's all it says. That's it. And we don't know how much or how often, but we do know that the dew, the manna was every single day. Verse 14, when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as a hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, "What is it?" That's all manna means. What is it? And my uncle, one time, my cousin made a dinner, and she brought it to the table, and he just said, "What is it?" Right? It's manna. Yeah. No idea what that dish is. Right? Don't even know if it's bread or meat or pasta. Just a mystery. But what is it? Right, because they didn't know what it was. And Moses said unto them, "This is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat." So this manna was these little dots on the ground, and they collected them, and they put them in a little jar, and that was their ration for the day. And it says there, don't keep it for the next day. Whatever you save for the next day will turn into worms, and it'll stink. Right? Isn't it? So, and some people, look at, notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank. Right? Moses says, don't save it till the morning because it'll have worms and it'll smell bad. And then the next morning people came and said, "Hey Moses, how come my bread has worms and it smells bad?" And he's like, what do you mean? I told you, like plainly as I possibly could. But whatever, that's the way Israel is, right? That's the way we are too. That's the way we are. But anyway, it is given every single day. Gather it on Friday, gather it for 2 days. And this is the first time, the introduction of the Sabbath. Right? In creation, we see God rested on the seventh day. But then here we see the Sabbath is illustrated it is defined in 3 different ways. And this is all before the law, right? The Sabbath. It's a great principle. I think we should all have a Sabbath. Right? The pace of life is crazy, right? Sunday, I had the crew here this morning, and maybe older crew, right? And they were saying that Sunday is a Sabbath, really was a Sabbath. Shops weren't open, stores weren't open, and I remember that as a kid, that Sunday was a quiet day everywhere. But I think it's important. In whatever capacity, in some way, we have a time where we can be quiet. And the 3 things are from verse 23, 25, and 29. It says that, first, that it's unto the Lord. It's a day that's unto the Lord. Second, it's a day of rest, physically. And then third, that you stay in your place. Actually, you stay home. So that's a tall task, isn't it? To do all those things in one day. Be at rest, to be with the Lord, and just be at home as a family. That's important, isn't it? It's important. And I think we can take a lot from that, especially considering that this is given to Moses before the law was introduced. It's not anything that we do to get anything, but it's something that God has given to us because we need it, right? Physically, we need it. Mentally, we need it. Emotionally, we need it. Like, how often do you have the ability just to sit in a chair and think about something, right? Usually if you sit in a chair to think about something, it's what you have to do next, right? And then you get a little anxious because you're sitting there doing nothing when you know you need to do something, right? Like that's our version of rest. But how about we take time and we open the Bible and we say that the next hour, at least the next hour, I'm going to turn off every notification, everything that beeps, everything that buzzes, everything that knocks, and I'm just going to listen to what God has to say in the Bible. And you'd be surprised once this becomes a practice how easily that could turn into 4 hours. Right? It's amazing because God draws you in and God speaks to you and there's nothing better. Right? Like what I'm talking about, like highlight reel, right? Jump out of a plane, right? Double black diamond, 4 hours in the Bible, right? Like it's right there with it. I think it's right there with it. And we can go let God take your soul on an adventure through His value for you, through His thoughts about you, through His intention for the world. It's amazing. So I think the Sabbath is something that we should have in our lives. And on that day, right? So on the Friday they would gather enough for both days, and it was enough. So this manna, whatever it is, this little dot thing, tasted like olive oil and honey. Doesn't that sound good? Sounds good to me. But it must have been unbelievably powerful food, right? Our version of angel food cake is just straight sugar, right? But this, I mean, I don't know. Like, we don't have Einstein bagels up here, do we? Einstein bagels? No? Oh, we do? They have a power bagel. And it's like they got every seed, every twig, every branch in it. And it's the power bagel, right? You get it with avocado and egg and it's like rocket fuel. But anyway, this manna must have had everything. It sustains people for 40 years. And that it is enough for them. If we just ate bread only for 40 years, it wouldn't last 40 years, right? Like it's not enough for us. But this bread was, because it's provided by God and it's given and it has everything necessary. And they could manipulate it, they could bake it, they could make it in different ways. So I'm sure in 40 years they had quite the recipe book for manna, right? Different ways to make manna. But look at verse 18. When they did measure it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing left over. He that gathered little had no lack. And they gathered every man according to his eating. Right? Brian was hungry. He got a lot. Right? He got a lot. Joyce, not as hungry. She got a little. He didn't have anything left over, and she didn't want any more. Right? Like it was God's supply, and God's supply is enough. And that fits to us personally. Right? How do I know? Like, what can God do in my heart in 5 minutes? What could God do in your heart in 2 minutes? Right? How could God speak in 30 seconds to somebody? And if God speaks, then is it enough? Right? It's enough. It's not about measurement, but it's about the personality, the personal connection in it, and the relationship in it. Right? Like of course I just spoke about spending an hour and 4 hours, right? Of course. But if it's God speaking, then it's enough. I will be content. I will be satisfied. So manna is something that is given to each person with the intention that person would be fed by it. And we have every day the ability to go get new manna. Right? New manna. Bread of life. Okay. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Right? Something that is enough for me, something that is personal, something that is given to me from heaven. John chapter 6, Christ said this, verse 32 to 35, I am the bread of life. Right? Christ is the bread of life. He's been given to us. Is there any lack in Christ? Did we miss anything? Psalm 37. Right? I have been young and now I am old. I'm not quite old. Right? I like to qualify that psalm. I have been young and I'm not really that old yet. But I've never seen God's righteous forsaken nor his children begging bread. Right? We are always sustained by Christ. The blood. And then verse 32, this is cool. Moses said, this is the thing which the Lord commands. Fill 1 omer of it, a little container, right? Like maybe like a pint or something, to be kept for your generations, that they may see the bread where I have fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of Egypt. Fill it up and show this to every generation that follows and say, this is the stuff that we ate in the wilderness, right? It's no joke. This is it. And you know where this little pot ended up? Inside the Ark of the Covenant, right? 3 things go inside the Ark of the Covenant. The tablets of the law, Aaron's rod that budded, the dead stick that sprouted almonds, which we'll get to, and then the manna. These are the things that end up in the ark, and they go from generation to generation. Where are they now? I have no idea. Right? They might be in heaven. The ark might be in heaven. It might be buried deep underground somewhere. It might be deep under the temple. Nobody knows, right? Indiana Jones thought he found it, but that wasn't it. All right? We have no idea where it is, but we do know that this was a significant thing that God had, and we'll get into it more as we go. But the Ark of the Covenant. Then verse 35, for 40 years they ate this. 40 years they ate manna. It says they ate it until they went into the promised land. And the interesting thing about this is that when they went into the promised land, they didn't go into a desolate place. When they cross over Jordan and they go into the promised land, what do they cross into a cultivated and fruitful land. When the 10 spies went in, what did they say? They said, look at these grapes, cluster of grapes. One guy couldn't even carry it, right? We go to the grocery store and there's get a little bag and there's a cluster of grapes. These guys had to carry the cluster of grapes between 2 guys on a pole. It was I don't know. I would like to see those grapes. Would you eat the grapes just all right, like a humongous thing, right? Who knows? It'll be like bowling balls, grapes the size of a bowling ball, right? And land flowing with milk and honey. It was a prosperous, it was a fruitful, beautiful land. So when they came into the promised land, the manna was cut off, right? Because now you are into the promised land and you don't have need for anything because God has brought you into something completely furnished. Imagine, apply this to our salvation, that we are called into Christ and we go in and it's just like this dusty room. It's like I got to clean it up, I got to arrange it the way I want. Right? But instead, when I am in Christ, I have everything. Right? I am given all things. Ephesians 1:3, all things that pertain unto life and godliness. Right? All spiritual blessings in heavenly places are given to me. That I have everything. I'm brought into a cultivated place, a place that is already fruitful, and I enjoy it. And I go and I check it all out. Remember 1 John 1:7, I love that. Walk in the light. Remember we said that on Sunday? Don't just walk in this little concentrated little beam, but walk in the whole thing. Tread all around. Check out every corner, every tree, everything that it is yours. Go figure it out. Go find it. Go use it. And this is the way that they go into the promised land. So that's when the manna cuts off. And then, okay, so then back to the, and if you're curious of what an omer is, verse 36, an omer is the 10th part of an ephah. Okay? Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know where it came from, but I have a note that says it's 2 quarts.
2 quarts? Okay. Yeah, I have biblical things, but I can't even remember pints and quarts and everything in English, so let alone in biblical terms. But yeah, okay, 2 quarts.
I don't know where my note came from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a note I read.
Philip, let the record show, Philip said it is 2 quarts.
Uh-oh.
That's Phyllis Belcher of Berlin, Mass, just for the record. Okay, but in all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed, chapter 17, from the wilderness of sin, hallelujah, leave the wilderness of sin, after their journeys, according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And what do you think they did? They complained. Yeah. Verse 2, wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and he said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, you know what? What is going on? I had a boss, and if he said that, you know what? You knew it was ooh, watch out, right? That he was annoyed, right? Why do you chide with me? Why do you tempt the Lord? Right? What is the deal with you guys? Have you not seen the miracle after miracle, the provision after provision, the bread raining from heaven, right? Hello? the quails, the whole thing, it's a miracle. Do you not think that he could give you a little bit of something to drink? The people thirsted there, and they murmured against Moses, saying, "Wherefore did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" Right? They're dramatic, always to the worst. Anybody else worst case scenario, right? Like my wife didn't answer the phone call. She's probably got in a car accident. She's in a ditch somewhere and nobody knows, right? But really, she just didn't have her phone on her, right? Like we go to worst case scenario. Like I got a cold. Ooh, I hope it's not cancer, right? Like I just go straight to it, right? These guys, right? That's these guys. I'm thirsty. Oh my God, we're gonna die in the wilderness, right? Like just straight to it. It's like have a cup of water, geesh. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, "What shall I do unto this people? They be most ready to stone me," right? Like this is getting bad. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Go on before the people, and take with thee the elders of Israel, and your rod wherewith you smote the river, and take it in your hand and go." The elders of Israel, that's what I meant earlier when I said like these are the guys who come as the representatives. And like I think he says, all right, you guys are discontent with everything, come with me. Right? You're coming with me and you're going to be a part of this. And look, I love this verse. Behold, verse 6, "Behold, I will stand before you there upon the rock in Horeb, and you shall smite the rock, and there shall come out water, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Interesting that it says that I will stand before you upon the rock. Where is the water coming from? The rock or God on the rock? Right? Right? Like God, this is coming from Christ. And if you look at 1 Corinthians 10 real quick, 1 Corinthians 10, Paul makes no uncertain terms about what is happening here. He said, 1 Corinthians 10:4, "And did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ." Right? Not that rock was like Christ, or that rock had an essence of Christ, but that rock was Christ. That He is, John chapter 4, He is the living water. He is the one. He is the only thing that can give to us. And from a rock, from a dead, inanimate, dry thing, water comes, and it is enough for everybody. Right? That's a miracle. That's the work of God. And Moses, again, is there in between God and Israel, and he is producing this miracle. And he called the place Massah and Meribah, which means temptation and strife. Right? Temptation and strife. And then the last part of chapter 17 is the first battle. The first battle, and this is the first mention of one of the most important guys in Israel's history, and that's Joshua. I'm sorry. Joseph's important too, but Joshua, right? Joshua is mentioned for the first time in verse 9. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us out men and go fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." Hey Joshua, yeah, what are you doing? Nothing. Go pick out some guys and make like an army. We're going to go fight tomorrow. I was like, excuse me, right? We're not military guys, right? We just escaped with our lives from Egypt. But you know what's amazing about this guy Joseph? That you follow him through this story. This is the first time we see him all the way to his death in the end of the book of Joshua. Right? It's so tough, Joshua and Joseph. Right? And to the end of the book of Joshua, you will not find a negative thing about him. You won't find any weirdness with this guy, right? With this guy, not a thing. The one thing you can say is after Jericho, when they went up against Ai, he was overconfident in his army, and he didn't consult God before they went, and they were defeated. That's the negative thing you can find about him. But you won't find anything. Gideon, you'll find something weird about Gideon. That Gideon let this whole thing get to his head, and at the end, it was a little strange with Gideon. And Moses had his problems, Abraham had his things, David had his things, but Joshua is a rock solid guy, and that's something to be said. And when you look through the Bible and you find a character who is so full of integrity and that he walks with God, that when you read about him, it says when Joshua died and then his disciples died, that's when Israel went off the rails. But Joshua held these people to the word, right? And it was because of Joshua 1:8 that this word will not depart from your mouth, right? Or depart from your mind. That is the word. And he's never in the mix of weirdness, right? It's a good term. When Aaron is making the golden calf and they're having just like a naked dance party around a fire, and that's as weird as it gets, right? I think. Joshua's not there. He's at the base of the mountain waiting for Moses. It says about Joshua that he stood before the Lord. And that's it. That's it. Isn't that awesome? So he's given the task, go make an army. We're going to fight Amalek tomorrow. And God knows who he's drawn from. I mean, these guys are laborers, really. I'm sure they can fight. I'm sure they're strong. But they're not trained warriors, and they're going up against an army. And what is his confidence? But it's a guy standing up behind him with his arms in the air. That's it. It says when Moses had his arms in the air, Joseph had the advantage, or Joshua had the advantage. But when Moses' arms got tired and they went down, then Amalek pushed back. So there's two guys. There's Aaron and there's Hur. These two guys, they put a rock underneath Moses. He sits down and they hold up his arms. And when they do that, Joshua can feel the power. I believe he can feel the difference in the power of God operating through him. Because there's no difference in him, is there? He is who he is. And his army is what they are. But when there is the power of God behind it, they become so much more than they are. So, I wonder if you look back and saw Moses' arms going down a couple times. He's like, come on, buddy. Come on, buddy. We're fighting. Just hold them up. But what a great picture of Moses and then men supporting Moses, right? What an awesome picture. That we hold up each other's arms, we support each other, and this is important. Look at the importance of it, right? Without her and without Aaron, what happens? I don't know, right? I don't know. But we do know what happens because of them. That when his arms are up and in his weakness, they are there to support him, right? They didn't say, well, give me that stick, Moses. I knew you couldn't do it. Aha! Right? But no, they supported God's man, and they lifted up his arms in his weakness. And it was a great picture of unity and of the power of God. The blessing, right? Psalm 133, blessing and unity. There it is right there. And look at verse 14. The Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek under heaven. Right? Rehearse it to who? Not Joseph, right? Joshua. Moses, write this in a book and rehearse it to Joshua. And we could say, but Joshua was there. He knew what happened. Yeah, he did, but he needs to be encouraged in what God had done. How often do we need to be encouraged in what God has done? Like I said earlier, it's easy for us to look back and see the highlights of Egypt, and those things all of a sudden look bigger than the work of God in my life. How easy is it to overlook the work of God? Somehow it's so easy, right? They were able to overlook the parting of the Red Sea and look back to Egypt like it was better, right? It's so important that I mark God's victories in my life and I rehearse them. Take a 3 months. Don't go too long before you think back to what God has done in your life and mark it, right? Write it down, somehow illustrate it that God did something in your life, because there will come a time when you look back and Egypt looks good. But then you have to have something to look back to that says, no, God did this. God defeated Amalek through me. Joshua, it's important that you remember this story, that when you couldn't fight, you couldn't do it, but when God's man had his arms lifted, you were able to do it. Right? God did this through you. You made an army out of these laborers. You did this. God did something. We have to have these milestones or these landmarks in our life, that we don't let them get knocked over. Because what did he do? Moses built an altar there, right? Remember when Abraham built altars in his life? He built altars at these significant places so he could look back at that altar and it would remind him of what God had done. Right? You can do that. It's fine. Put a little pile of rocks in your backyard or something. All right? Say, that's God did that, God did that, God did that, God did that, whatever. But in some way, have something that you can look to and know that God did it, even if it's just a mental, like Moses did this in Psalm 90. Right? If I will count my blessings and consider what God has done in my life, then I will remember it. Right? So that's it. And then chapter 18, as we close here, chapter 18 is just a quick story. Moses is overwhelmed by being the one and only authority in all this camp. 600,000 men and then their families, so whatever, 3 million people, and he is the one. He is morning to evening sitting in judgment. Right? Somebody said, he took my pot of manna. No, he took my pot of manna. Moses is like, well, then take my pot of manna. Just get out of the way, whatever, right? Like he's dealing with every matter, big and small, and he's the only one that's there. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes, brings his wife and his 2 sons back. And he sees this and he says, this isn't healthy, Moses. You're going to burn out quick. You need men. So he delegates, and he has men over thousands, over hundreds, over 50s, and over 10s. And the smaller matters came to them, and the big matters came to Moses. So this whole thing of delegating authority and taking and empowering other men to do things, it's right here in chapter 18. And the question this morning was, when did Moses' wife leave? Right? Because if you look back to Exodus chapter 4, Exodus chapter 4, it says that Moses went into Egypt with his wife and 2 sons. Moses returns to Egypt. And Moses, verse 18, Moses went and returned to Jethro's father-in-law and said, let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are at Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. In verse 20, he took his wife and his sons, and he set them on an ass, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand. All right, so his wife and sons went into Egypt with him, but at some point he sent them back. And we don't know why, right? Somebody said maybe he sent them back when the plague started to come, and he said it's going to get a little gnarly, you might want to leave. But also remember when Moses came back, he was identified as a slave. Remember the first time he went to Pharaoh, Pharaoh said, go back to your burden. Yeah. And Moses could have said, I've never been a slave, don't talk to me like that. Yeah. I've always been a prince or a place in a high place. Maybe that's the time, I don't know. Maybe it turned, but either way he sent them back. And however it happened, I think probably Moses, once they were out and they had a camp, he probably sent to Jethro and said, go get my wife and kids, right? And they came down. So Jethro came down and saw what he gave some advice. Moses took his advice. It was very wise. It was good. And that's it. Right? Then by the end of the chapter 18, they are actually at Mount Sinai, and that starts a whole nother section. This actually starts a whole nother dispensation of time where men are under the law. All right, so this is the next dispensation beginning here. So, amen? Amen. Any questions? Yes, Kwame.
I was just a little confused. So Moses' family left the camp then?
No, so I don't know when they left. But it says, if you read chapter 18 there, it says he sent them, at some point he sent them away.
While they're in the desert?
No, before.
Oh, when they're in Egypt.
Yeah, so they go into Egypt with him, but then they're not there at the parting of the Red Sea. I don't know when they left. I think it said he sent them away. If you read chapter 18, you'll find I didn't underline it, so I can't find it.
18:2. But
Oh yeah. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back. So, no idea when he sent her back, but he did. So did he? If it was before the plagues, if it was before the parting in the Red Sea, but they're not there for a lot of that stuff. Yeah. He probably said, "I'm going to be busy for the next few months. You might as well go stay with Dad."
And then it keeps mentioning Moses' staff. Like, what's the significance behind that?
It's just God using something that's unexpected, right? So when Moses was in the backside of the desert, when he was called in Exodus chapter 3, God said, take the staff that's in your hand, it's something that Moses had, and throw it down, and it turned into a serpent. Like, this is something that was always a representation of the pure work of God. Like, there was nothing natural in it. This wasn't some magic stick that he found in the desert and then it did miracles. But it was something that he had previously, and God said, this is what I'm able to do with something that's dead, something that has no life in it. I am able to use it and do anything with it.
Wasn't
So,
the staff for a shepherd, the staff was the offensive weapon, and the other one was for herding the sheep?
oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's what Steve Jeremiah was saying.
Oh, okay.
The staff has power.
Huh.
God used it for that.
Yeah. Yeah, because Aaron's rod also was the same way. Like, it was significant. So, yeah. We are dead sticks too, right? And God uses us. Yeah.
I've heard also that the staff was significant for the leader of whatever tribe it was, because they put their lineage or important things that they would carve on there. Like,
Okay.
this is what, so it's kind of a genealogical record.
Uh-huh.
And also, years ago, Joyce and Jessica sang a song called "What's That You Have in Your Hand? I Can Use It If You're Willing to Use It." Remember that? What's that you have in your hand?
Cup of coffee, right? That would be my answer these days. What's going to happen with it?
Take what's little and I'll make it great.
Yeah. And so we'll get into